In the year 2005, you could you could disappear into almost 40% of the United States.
That's right. Almost half.
And, by disappear, I don't mean like enter the witness protection program or anything dramatic like that.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, you could step into a geographic void, which was nearly half the physical landmass of the country at the time, and generate absolutely zero digital footprint.
Literally none.
No one tracking your vehicle, no cell towers logging your coordinates, no algorithms predicting your destination, 40%.
Yeah.
But today, less than 2 decades later, that number has dropped to under 10%.
It's a profound geographic compression.
It really is. And it's shrinking by the hour, honestly. So I want you, the listener, to just close your eyes for a second, assuming you're not driving, of course.
Hopefully not.
Right. I want you to picture an old paper map. The kind you had to wrestle with to fold correctly, the kind you'd buy at a gas
The
station.
big fold-outs.
Exactly. If you look closely at those older maps, especially the ones covering vast stretches of, say, the American West or the deep woods, you'll find blank spaces.
Just empty paper.
Yeah, entire squares of geography where the cartographer essentially just threw their hands up and said, well, there are some trees here, maybe a ridge, but mostly it's just space.
It was unobserved space.
Right.
And that absence of ink, it wasn't a deliberate act of hiding by the people living there. It was simply the default physical state of the world at that time.
Exactly. Unobserved by default.
Yeah.
And the mission of our deep dive today is to map out exactly how and why those blank spaces are disappearing.
We're essentially building a new map.
We are. To do this, we've pulled together a really fascinating stack of sources. We've got white papers from telecommunications engineers, technical manuals from private data brokers,
Which are very revealing.
very revealing, plus research from the Institute for Spatial Analysis and municipal grant instructions outlining city infrastructure projects.
And we should probably set expectations right at the top
That's
here.
the idea, yeah.
We are conducting a purely technical architectural exploration of modern infrastructure.
Great. We're not here to spin conspiracy theories.
No, absolutely not. And we're not making emotional pleas about the death of privacy or, romanticizing the past. We are operating as cartographers.
Just looking at the raw blueprints of how the modern world functions.
Exactly.
Because, as the sources point out, the disappearance of these blank spaces isn't some sudden dramatic event.
Right. There was no villain flipping a master switch in a dark room.
It is a slow, incremental, and entirely invisible filling of the gaps.
It's architecture. The infrastructure we're going to explore today is built on principles of continuity and redundancy.
So it's constantly overlapping.
Yes, it's an infrastructure of observation that is constantly updating, constantly weaving itself tighter layer by layer until the very concept of an unobserved space becomes statistically insignificant.
Okay, so if we have all these disjointed data points, like a camera here, a cell tower there, how is this actually working in practice?
That's the fundamental question.
Because to understand the completed map, we first have to look at the tools drawing it. Let's break down the physical and mobile architecture described in those engineering papers.
Where the stack begins.
Exactly. Where does this surveillance stack actually start?
We begin at the foundation, which the infrastructure papers refer to as Layer 1.
Layer 1.
The physical capture systems. This is hardware bolted to the earth.
Like cameras on poles.
Yes, the most visible component is the network of fixed cameras. But we really have to discard the 20th century idea of closed-circuit television here.
You mean the old VHS tapes recording a blurry gas station parking lot?
Exactly. We aren't talking about that. Today, we are talking about facial recognition nodes.
Okay, I want to pause on that word nodes. Because that implies they're part of a larger brain, not just standalone cameras.
That's a very precise way to look at it.
What is actually happening inside that hardware? Because I think most of us assume a camera just takes a picture of a face and saves it in a folder.
That's a huge misconception, actually. A facial recognition node does not care about a photograph in the traditional sense.
It doesn't want a picture.
No, it cares about biometric geometry. When you walk past one of these nodes, which are densely layered across airports, built into traffic light housings, embedded in commercial storefronts.
They're everywhere.
Right. When you walk past one, it maps the topological landscape of your face.
Topological. Like reading the elevation on a mountain map?
Precisely like that. The software identifies dozens of nodal points on the human face.
Like what kind of points?
The exact distance between your pupils, the depth of your eye sockets, the shape of your cheekbone,
Oh, wow.
the length of your jawline. It takes all these physical measurements and runs them through a mathematical algorithm to convert your face into a unique alphanumeric string.
A string of text.
Yes, a hash code.
So it's not storing a JPEG of my face. It's storing a math equation that represents my face.
Exactly. And a math equation requires incredibly little digital storage space, right?
Oh, so it's tiny. Just a few bytes of text.
Exactly. Which means it can be cross-referenced against millions of other mathematical strings in fractions of a second. This is happening in real time.
That is incredibly fast.
But alongside biometric capture, operating on a completely different frequency of observation, we have automated license plate readers, ALPRs.
Okay, yeah. I see these all the time now.
They're very common.
They're usually mounted on highway overpasses, hanging off toll booths, or strapped to those solar-powered trailers parked on the side of the road.
Right.
But again, how are they different from a regular camera just snapping a picture of my bumper?
It comes down to optical character recognition, or OCR, and infrared elimination.
Infrared, so it sees in the dark.
Yes, an ALPR system fires infrared light at your vehicle as it passes. Now, license plates are coated in a retroreflective material.
So they glow under infrared.
Exactly. They bounce that infrared light directly back to the sensor, cutting through darkness, rain, and even headlight glare.
That's why they always get a clean shot.
Right. The camera captures that high contrast reflection, and the OCR software instantly reads the physical shape of the letters and numbers, converting them into digital text.
So just like the face node, it turns the physical object into a text file.
A text file accompanied by vital metadata.
Like what?
The exact time of day down to the millisecond, the precise GPS coordinate of the reader, and the vector, the direction your vehicle was traveling.
And I guess when you link thousands of these readers across a municipality or a state, they stop being mere toll collection devices.
They transform movement into a sequence.
A sequence. I like that word. Because if I pass a reader at exit 4 and another at exit 8 and another at exit 12...
You're not just a car on a road anymore.
Right. I'm generating a measurable longitudinal timeline of data points.
You're drawing a line on the map.
Yep.
That is layer 1, the stationary foundation. The subject you moves through this sensor field.
But layer 1 has obvious geographical limitations, right? I mean, you can't bolt a camera to every single tree in a forest.
No, you can't. And that introduces layer 2, the mobile interception systems.
Okay, moving hardware.
Right. If the subject will not move through the sensor field moves to the subject.
And this is where the sources start talking about some pretty aggressive hardware, the cell site simulators.
Often referred to commercially as IMSI catchers.
Okay, yeah. I've heard of these. Sometimes they're called stingrays in the news.
Yes, that's a common brand name.
But I need you to explain this like I'm 5. Because I look at my phone, I see the signal bars, and I just assume my phone knows it's talking to AT&T or Verizon.
That's what it wants you to think.
How does an MSI catcher actually trick my phone?
To understand the exploit, you have to understand the fundamental design flaw or feature, depending on your perspective of cellular architecture.
Okay, what's the flaw?
Your mobile phone is incredibly anxious.
Anxious? What do you mean by that?
It is designed to be in a constant state of seeking. It desperately wants to maintain a connection to the network, so it is permanently scanning the radio frequencies for the strongest available cellular tower.
So my phone is basically just walking into a crowded room and yelling, "Who has the loudest voice?"
And it will run toward that loudest voice every single time.
Really?
Yes. Historically, cellular networks were built on a protocol of one-way authentication.
Meaning?
The tower would ask the phone to prove its identity, but the phone would never ask the tower to prove its identity.
Let me make sure I'm hearing this correctly.
It's a blind spot.
You're saying my phone, this $1,000 piece of advanced technology, doesn't verify if a cell tower is real. It just blindly connects to whatever blasts the strongest signal.
Yes.
That seems like a massive security oversight.
Well, it was a design choice made decades ago. They did it to ensure seamless handoffs as you drive down a highway, passing from one tower's jurisdiction to another without dropping your call.
Oh, I see. Speed over security.
Exactly. And an MSI catcher exploits this exact trust mechanism. It is a portable radio device. It's easily small enough to be mounted in the trunk of a standard patrol vehicle or carried in a low-flying aircraft.
So they're completely mobile.
Completely. When activated, it broadcasts a signal that mimics a legitimate cellular tower, but it broadcasts at a significantly higher power level than the actual towers nearby.
So my anxious phone sees this incredibly strong, loud signal, dumps the real tower and automatically connects to the fake one in the trunk of the car.
Without a single notification on your screen, you'd never know.
That is wild.
And the moment your phone handshakes with this simulator, the simulator demands the phone's IMSI number.
What exactly is an MSI number?
The International Mobile Subscriber Identity. It is a unique 15-digit number hard-coded into your SIM card.
So it's basically the ultimate ID badge.
It is your ultimate digital identifier on the network. A cell site simulator acts as a portable, deniable tower.
Deniable meaning it leaves no trace.
Right. It does not ask the broader commercial network for permission to exist. It simply becomes the network in that localized 100-yard radius. You offer up your deepest digital identity in exchange for the promise of network continuity.
That is just... wow. And layer 2 isn't just these fake towers, right?
No, there are other mobile components.
The municipal infrastructure outlines also mention drone-based imaging platforms and automated patrol units.
Yes, roving sensors.
Just sweeping neighborhoods, hoovering up data on the move, which feels incredibly dense. But then we hit layer 3, and this is where the sheer scale of the data collection started making my head spin.
Layer 3 is network surveillance. It is the ambient environment.
Ambient, so it's just always there.
Always. We are no longer talking about cameras reading your face or portable towers actively tricking your phone. We are talking about the passive, continuous logging of standard network protocols.
I think of it like the invisible glue.
A fitting description. The foundation of Layer 3 is cellular metadata tracking.
How does that differ from the stingrays?
Every time your phone receives a text, downloads an email in the background, or simply checks in with the network to maintain its signal, the legitimate telecommunications tower logs that event.
The real tower.
Yes, it logs the time, the data payload size, and the physical sector of the tower you connected to.
So even if I'm not making a phone call?
Even if you're not making a call, your physical location is being triangulated and stored by the telecom provider simply by possessing a powered-on device.
Okay, but what if I pull up my phone and put it in airplane mode? Or what if I don't even have a cellular plan active? I just use Wi-Fi.
That doesn't make you invisible.
Because the engineering papers spend a lot of time on something called Wi-Fi pro-blogging. Explain how that works, because I think it catches a lot of people off guard.
It is a brilliant utilization of hardware behavior. Every piece of Wi-Fi-enabled hardware, your phone, your laptop, your smartwatch, has a network interface controller.
A specific chip.
Right. And hard-coded into that physical chip at the factory is a media access control address, a MAC key address.
So it's basically the digital VIN number of my phone.
Exactly. A 12-character alphanumeric string that is entirely unique to that specific device.
Okay, so how does it track me if I'm not connected to anything?
Now, if your Wi-Fi antenna is turned on, even if you are not actively connected to a network, just walking down the street with the phone in your pocket, your device is constantly shouting out into the void.
Shouting.
Asking, are any of the networks I know nearby? Is Home Network here? Is Starbucks Guest here?
Oh, I see. It's just walking down the street calling out the names of its friends.
And every time it shouts, it broadcasts its unique MSC address. Layer 3 observation utilizes this behavior by deploying passive listening sensors.
Where are these sensors?
Commercial spaces, city trash cans, smart streetlights, and municipal transit systems. They deploy hardware that simply listens for these shouts.
The trash cans are listening.
Yes, they don't provide internet, they don't try to connect to your phone, they just sit there silently logging the MSC address, the signal strength, and the timestamp.
Which means they can track my physical movement through a shopping mall or down a city block.
Precisely.
Mapping exactly where I stop, how long I stand in front of a specific store, and what path I take to the exit, all without ever needing a camera or a cell tower.
It maps the physical presence of a device through its invisible exhaust.
Wow.
And of course, Layer 3 is rounded out by standard IP-based geolocation from the applications you use.
The apps themselves.
Yes. The continuous stream of coordinate data being sent back to servers every time you open a map, a weather app, or a social feed.
Okay, let me try to offer a visual to help ground this for you, because hearing all these different systems, biometric hashes, OCR, IMSI catchers, MSC addresses, it can get a little abstract.
It is a lot of data streams to conceptualize.
So imagine you are back in a classroom and the teacher pulls out one of those old overhead projectors, with the bright bulb and the glass top.
A cartographic analogy. Let us construct the map.
So imagine laying down clear plastic transparencies on that glass. You take the first transparency, and it is a map of layer 1. the physical nodes.
The cameras and plate readers.
Right. If you look at just that one sheet, you see a lot of dots clustered in the city centers, heavy lines along the major toll highways. But there are massive empty gaps in the residential neighborhoods and the rural areas. It's highly localized.
An incomplete picture, geographically speaking.
Right. Then you lay down the second transparency, layer 2. The mobile interceptors, the stingrays, the drones.
The moving sensors.
Now you add these roving, temporary dots that smear across the areas the fixed cameras missed. It fills in some blanks, but it's still fragmented.
Yes.
Finally, you lay down the third transparency, layer 3, the ambient network. The Wi-Fi probes and cell tower triangulation.
Invisible glue.
This sheet is almost completely shaded in. It covers nearly everywhere a human being might walk with a piece of electronics in their pocket.
When you activate the light beneath the glass, it shines through all three overlapping transparencies.
Each layer alone has blind spots. But stacked together on that projector, they form an incredibly dense, overlapping grid.
What is crucial to observe here is the mechanics of that overlap.
How they work together.
Yes, it is not merely that the layers coexist. It is that they actively compensate for one another's physical limitations.
Give me an example of that.
If an automated license plate reader on a state highway is struck by debris and goes offline, a localized failure in Layer 1, your vehicle might still pass through the catchment area of a municipal Wi-Fi probe, logging your dashboard navigation system's MAC address, which is Layer 3.
Oh, I see. Or if I leave my phone at home to intentionally defeat Layer 3, the facial recognition nodes of Layer 1 still capture my biometric transit as I walk into a train station.
Exactly. The redundancy is the architecture. The system does not require perfection or total uptime from any single piece of hardware because the stack itself is resilient.
But wait, here's where I realized a massive flaw in my own overhead projector analogy. Stacking sheets of plastic on glass is just a visual trick. The ink on transparency 1 doesn't actually communicate with the ink on transparency 3.
That's true. They are separate physical objects.
Having all these physical sensors is one thing. Producing thousands of petabytes of raw data is one thing. But how does the system actually process all this overlapping noise?
The data has to go somewhere.
Right, because 1 million license plate timestamps and 1 billion Wi-Fi pings are completely useless if they are just sitting in separate digital filing cabinets. They don't magically talk to each other just because they exist in the same city.
You have identified the exact pivot point in modern cartography.
Okay, tell me more.
Collecting the data is a solved physics problem. The true challenge is the architecture of synthesis. This brings us to what the spatial analysis sources call the integration problem.
The integration problem.
It introduces the concept of the mesh and the data integration coefficient.
The mesh. So we aren't just stacking layers anymore.
No. If layers 1, 2, and 3 are the architecture of capture, layers 4 and 5 are the architecture of integration.
Integration.
Surveillance is no longer a collection of vertical separate silos, where the highway patrol keeps their local server, the city police keep theirs, and the cellular telecom companies keep theirs. It has evolved into a lateral, interoperable network.
Okay, we need to dig into this deeply. What exactly is Layer 4? Who is building this mesh?
Layer 4 consists of data aggregation nodes. The primary physical and digital manifestations of this in the United States are called fusion centers.
Fusion centers? That sounds incredibly governmental, like a bunker out of a spy movie.
I know the name implies that, but the reality is much more bureaucratic and software-driven. They are state and federal nodes of data synthesis.
Oh, just big server farms.
Imagine a massive computational hub where local municipal law enforcement, state highway patrols, federal transit authorities, and national intelligence bureaus all pool their disparate data streams.
But how do they even do that? I mean, a traffic camera database built in 2012 by some local county probably doesn't speak the same software language as a federal biometric database built in 2024.
That was the historical friction point.
Yeah.
You're right, but the development of standardized data sharing protocols has smoothed that friction.
They made a universal translator for the data.
Essentially, yes. The architecture is now fundamentally lateral. A local municipality's facial recognition feed from a city park is standardized and looped into a state-level database.
Right.
That state database is then quietly made accessible through federal query channels. Information in a fusion center does not simply sit in cold storage waiting for a specific search warrant.
And it's active.
It flows. It actively cross-references.
So it's constantly churning the data, looking for connections. If I have all these ingredients, flour, sugar, eggs, They don't do anything sitting on a counter.
Ah.
The fusion center is the oven. It bakes the raw, disjointed data into a single, cohesive cake.
A very functional metaphor. The data is chemically altered by integration. Let me give you an operational example.
Please do.
If a specific license plate is flagged by a local ALPR on a county road, that single data point is noise.
Right, it's just a car driving.
But in a fusion center, that ALPR timestamp can be cross-referenced against federal cellular metadata to identify which specific mobile phone was moving at the exact same geographic speed and trajectory as the vehicle.
It matches the phone to the car, even if the driver's face was never seen.
Exactly. Fragmented observation produces noise, but integrated observation produces clarity.
Okay, that makes sense for government and law enforcement data they share with each other. But the structural papers mentioned a fifth layer, layer 5. What is that?
Layer 5 is the commercial data ecosystem, the private data brokers.
Wait, the companies that track what I click on to sell me shoes, why are they in a surveillance deep dive?
Because they provide the most intimate telemetry available. It is the silent, constant, invisible flow of private behavioral data.
Like what kind of behavior?
Your purchasing habits. The location pings from your weather application, the telemetry from the navigation software built into your car's dashboard, the step counter in your smartwatch.
So basically, my weather app isn't just telling me to bring an umbrella, it's logging my exact GPS coordinates every 10 minutes.
Yes, advertising networks and app-based telemetry collectors gather this information continuously. Now, it is crucial to note that this data is not collected for security purposes.
No, it's collected for profit.
Purely for profit. It is behavioral intelligence meant to drive consumer engagement and targeted advertising.
Right. The fast food app needs my location so my fries are hot exactly when I pull into the drive-thru. It's a convenience exchange.
But the critical mechanism, the true power of Layer 5, is what happens after that convenience data is collected.
Where does it go?
The sources outline in stark detail how this commercial data is repurposed. Through application programming interfaces, or APIs, these private commercial datasets are legally bridged into the governmental stack.
Let's define API for the listener, just to be crystal clear. It's basically a software waiter.
With the software waiter, yes.
It takes a request from one program, goes to another program's kitchen, gets the data, and brings it back.
An excellent way to visualize it. An API allows two entirely different software systems to communicate and exchange data seamlessly in real time.
Okay.
Contracts are signed between private data brokers and government agencies. Legal frameworks permit the selective sharing, licensing, and direct purchasing of this commercial data by those Layer 4 fusion centers.
Hold on, I want to make sure I am fully understanding the implications of this.
That's a major shift.
You're saying if I let a coffee shop app track my location for loyalty points, that commercial data, my physical location at 8:00 a.m. every Tuesday, can just blur right into law enforcement databases?
Yes. The traditional legal line between public government collection and private commercial collection is effectively dissolved by the contract. Data brokers act as the intermediary.
But doesn't the government need a warrant to track my location like that?
A government agency generally needs a warrant to compel a telecommunications company to hand over your specific location data. However, if that same agency can simply open a software dashboard and purchase a bulk data set of commercial app telemetry on the open market from a private data broker, the warrant requirement is bypassed.
Because they just bought it.
They are not compelling the data. They are simply buying a commercially available product.
Wow. That completely redefines how we think about our phones. It's not just a surveillance tool if I'm doing something wrong. It's a surveillance tool because I want to know if it's partly cloudy today.
What is vital to understand from an architectural standpoint is how this Layer 5 integration transforms the nature of the map.
How so?
The system is not a single, monolithic, omniscient computer like you see in science fiction. It is a topology of distributed observation. The APIs bridge the commercial and the governmental.
So earlier I asked how the system processes all the noise. You're saying it uses commercial data to fill the blind spots of the physical hardware.
Precisely. It uses commercial purchasing data to fill the gaps in physical ALPR data. It uses Wi-Fi probe logs to verify cellular triangulation.
It's all checking against itself.
It is a self-healing, interoperable mesh. If one sensor fails, the API simply pulls from a different data set to bridge the timeline.
Okay, if this mesh is seamlessly integrated and the governmental and the commercial layers are shaking hands and swapping data constantly, what does that actually look like when applied to the physical map of the country?
It changes the geography of observation.
Let's look at the actual arithmetic of what is left. Let's talk about the math of the disappearing blank spaces.
The spatial analysis sources measure this using observability metrics.
Observability metric.
Yes, this is the standardized way cartographers of the system quantify the disappearance of unmonitored space.
The sources outline 3 specific variables for this math. Let's walk through them and try to ground them in a normal daily routine.
The first variable is surveillance density, or SD.
Okay.
This is a straightforward calculation of hardware, the number of active monitoring systems per square mile, the cameras, the plate readers, the Wi-Fi sniffers.
Okay, so SD is the actual physical hardware looking at you as you commute from the suburbs into the city.
Yes. The second variable is signal penetration, or SP.
Also,
This measures the percentage of a geographic area that maintains continuous, unbroken network coverage, cellular towers, municipal Wi-Fi, and satellite bandwidth.
so SD is the hardware looking for me, and SP is the invisible net waiting to catch a ping from the device in my pocket.
Correct. And the third variable is the one we just explored with the fusion centers,
Right.
the data integration coefficient, or DIC.
EIC, got it.
This is the mathematical degree to which these independent systems, the cameras, the towers, the private brokers, actually share, aggregate, and cross-reference their data in real time.
The oven factor, how well the cake is baked.
Exactly. Let us examine the timeline shift utilizing these 3 variables. Let us look back to the year 2005.
The era of flip phones and MapQuest printouts.
In 2005, the surveillance density was highly localized. You had analog security cameras inside banks, perhaps some early red light cameras at major city intersections, but they were sparse.
Mostly because they had to be wired, right?
Yes. The physical hardware limitation of routing copper wire to closed-circuit systems prevented widespread deployment.
And the signal penetration was incredibly inconsistent back then. I remember clearly, the second you drove out of the city limits or drove through a tunnel or even just walked into a basement, your call dropped.
The cellular bands were weak, and the infrastructure was incomplete. And crucially, the data integration coefficient in 2005 was nearly 0.
0. Wow.
Systems existed, but they were deeply siloed by physical hardware constraints. The traffic camera storing data on a local hard drive did not speak to the cellular tower.
Right.
The commercial grocery store loyalty card did not speak to a federal transit database. The map was full of fragmented systems.
Which is why 40% of the country was essentially off the grid. But fast forward to 2025.
The variables have fundamentally altered. By 2025, surveillance density has expanded exponentially,
Because of cheaper cameras?
driven by cheap, high-definition optical sensors and the laying of massive fiber optic backbones. SD has pushed out of the urban cores deep into suburban and exurban environments.
And signal penetration.
With the rollout of 5G architecture, which requires a much higher density of smaller transmission nodes, signal penetration approaches near total coverage across all populated regions.
And the data integration coefficient has skyrocketed because of cloud computing and APIs. The silo walls have been demolished.
Facial recognition operates across municipal networks. Private data brokers fill behavioral gaps. So let us map this new geography. The sources break down the country into specific zones of observability.
Let's start with the cities.
Urban centers now possess near total observability. The density of layers 1 through 5 is so profound that moving through a metropolitan area without generating a continuous overlapping data trail is practically physically impossible.
What about the suburbs? I feel like people assume once they get to their cul-de-sac, things quiet down.
Suburban corridors have high observability. There might be intermittent physical hardware gaps, a residential street without a municipal camera.
Sure.
However, the signal penetration in commercial telemetry, the smart doorbells on every house, the navigation systems in the minivans, compensate for those physical gaps instantly.
But here is the specific estimate from the research that really stopped me in my tracks.
The percentage of the void.
Yes. They define unobservable geography incredibly strictly. They define it as an area lacking persistent physical surveillance, and lacking network traceability, a true, genuine blank space.
A very high bar for invisibility.
Very high. In 2005, roughly 30 to 40% of the United States landmass met that definition. Mountains, deserts, deep national forests, long stretches of rural highway in the Midwest.
And today,
But by 2025, that estimate drops to under 10%.
a phenomenal collapse of unmonitored territory.
Under 10%. I have to push back on this, or at least ask for a deeper explanation, because I have driven across this country. I've been out in Nevada, out in Wyoming.
It feels vast.
There is so much empty space. How is it physically, geometrically possible to reduce the unobservable landmass to under 10% without putting a solar-powered camera on every single cactus and pine tree?
It requires a shift in how you understand observation. It is a matter of understanding indirect capture and probability mathematics.
Indirect capture.
Okay, the system does not need to put a camera on a cactus.
Yeah.
The gaps are being filled not by hunting for them with physical hardware, but by infrastructure expansion from above and below.
Above and below. Walk me through the mechanics of that. Let's start with above.
From above, we are witnessing the massive expansion of satellite constellations in low Earth orbit.
Oh, like Starlink.
Yes. Companies are launching thousands of interconnected satellites designed to provide continuous broadband internet to the most remote corners of the globe.
Like the satellite arrays you can see moving across the night sky.
Exactly. If a remote, off-the-grid cabin in the deep woods installs a satellite dish to get an internet connection, that geographic area is no longer a dark zone.
It lights up on the map.
It is broadcasting an IP address. It is routing network traffic. It is visible to layer 3. The sky itself has become the network infrastructure.
Okay, so the satellites cover the deep wilderness from above. What about from below?
Rural broadband initiatives and mobility mapping.
What's rural broadband doing?
The governments are heavily subsidizing the laying of fiber optic cables down remote county roads to connect distant farming communities. Once that fiber backbone arrives, local Wi-Fi networks activate, cell towers are upgraded, and the devices ping the network.
And you mentioned mobility mapping in the sources.
Portable surveillance fills the mobility gaps. Consider a delivery driver taking a package from a massive e-commerce company down a 10-mile dirt road in Montana.
Okay.
That delivery vehicle is essentially a rolling sensor array. It is loaded with GPS telemetry, outward-facing cameras for liability and routing, and network transmitters.
It's mapping the road while it drives.
It's constantly pinging the broader network. By simply driving down that dirt road, the commercial vehicle temporarily maps the unobservable space.
The Amazon truck acts as a roving probe.
Exactly. So functional observability extends into the gaps through indirect data capture. If the only physical way into a 50-square-mile unobserved wilderness is a single 2-lane access road,
Which is common out west.
and there is an ALPR system mounted at the entrance of that road,
Then the wilderness itself doesn't need to be monitored.
because the entry and exit timestamps dictate your presence within the void.
Right.
If you enter at 2:0 p.m. and exit at 6:0 p.m., the system knows precisely where you were for those 4 hours, even if it could not see you every minute.
It deduces your location.
The unobserved space has not been completely literally eliminated down to 0 square inches. But through inference and indirect capture, it has been rendered statistically insignificant to the mapping system.
Okay, let's play this out in reality, because I think everyone listening has this urge, occasionally, to just unplug.
To find the blank space.
Yeah. Let's say you deliberately seek out that statistically insignificant gap. You want to find that less than 10% void. What happens when you step into it?
This brings us to the most profound illusion at the heart of the modern map, the illusion of escape.
Let me set the scene for the listener, drawing straight from the atmospheric descriptions in the spatial analysis papers. Picture this. You are driving.
Okay.
You are overwhelmed with the notifications, the tracking, the screens. You consciously decide to get off the interstate. You take a state highway, then a county road, and finally you turn down a gravel road. A route no algorithm suggested.
Completely off script.
Exactly. You look at your dashboard, the cell bars begin to drop. 4 bars, 2 bars, 1 bar, 0.
The signal dies.
You look around, there are no cameras at the intersection, no license plate readers on the fence posts, no delivery trucks, just dust, trees, and distance. For a moment, sitting in the cab of that car, you feel a profound, heavy sense of isolation.
A real sense of freedom, maybe.
You feel like you are entirely outside the system. You have found the blank space on the map.
But you must understand the mechanics of the mesh. It is an absolute illusion.
Break down the code for us. Why is that feeling of being off the grid entirely false?
Because you were perceiving the situation through human senses, what you can see and hear in that moment. You must look at how the predictive algorithms interpret that moment.
Okay, how does the algorithm see it?
First, you have not disappeared from the map. Your last known geographic trajectory is permanently logged on the grid.
So the system knows exactly where I entered the void.
Precisely. The ALPR you passed on the state highway recorded your vector and speed. The final cellular tower that got your phone's desperate handshake before the signal died Log your exact GPS coordinates and heading.
So I left a glaring digital marker at the edge of the woods.
A massive signpost. But once you pass that marker, you think you're invisible.
Right, there are no cameras.
Only to optical sensors, not to mathematics.
Hmm.
Second, your eventual destination can be probabilistically inferred. The topography of the void is known to the system. The dirt roads leading out of it are mapped by satellites. The algorithms can calculate the mathematical likelihood of where you will reemerge based on your vehicle's known fuel capacity, the terrain difficulty, and historical traffic patterns of that area.
So I'm basically a ball rolling through a dark tube. Just because you can't see the ball in the middle of the tube doesn't mean you don't know it went in, how fast it was rolling, and exactly which hole it has to pop out of.
An incredibly apt analogy. You are simply a temporary variable between two known data points, and gaps in a continuous redundant system are inherently temporary.
They don't last.
Drive down that gravel road long enough, and eventually the topography shifts. You crest a hill, the signal returns.
My phone frantically connects to a tower.
Another node, another handshake with the network, the tube ends. From the algorithm's perspective, the road was never outside the system. It was merely a brief, calculable pause in observation.
So what does this all mean for us? If trying to drop off the grid actually changes how the system views you? The sources point out a really strange paradox here that completely flipped my understanding of privacy.
The paradox of digital absence.
Digital absence.
This is crucial to understanding the architectural shift of the last 20 years. Historically, in the paper map era, to disappear meant simply to leave.
You just packed up.
You packed a bag, you moved to a new town, you stopped calling people, you became unknown. Absence was the natural, passive consequence of departure.
Right. If you weren't physically there, you weren't there. There was no data.
But today, disappearance is procedural. Because the mesh we have described, layers 1 through 5, the high data integration coefficient, the near total signal penetration, operates on the baseline assumption of continuous presence.
Continuity is key.
The system is designed and coded to track continuity.
It expects me to exist digitally.
It expects your phone to ping a tower every few minutes. It expects your credit card to be swiped for coffee. It expects your license plate to pass a reader on your commute. Presence is the baseline state. Therefore, absence becomes anomalous. When a continuous, predictable data stream suddenly halts without a known reason, a phone turning off, a bank account going dormant, a vehicle disappearing from the ALPR network, it creates a void in the topology.
A sudden black hole.
And to an automated predictive system, an anomaly is not just a blank spot. An anomaly is an event. An anomaly becomes a flag.
This is wild. So the act of trying to vanish.
The more completely you attempt to vanish, the more distinctly you appear to the architecture of the system.
It actually highlights you.
In anomaly detection programming, baseline deviation is the primary trigger. If you leave your smartphone at home, drain your bank accounts in cash, and drive a vehicle entirely unregistered to you into the wilderness, your sudden massive creation of a data gap alerts the integration nodes far faster than if you had simply maintained a low-level predictable routine.
Let me make sure I've got this. I don't actually eliminate my presence when I try to hide. I just radically change the shape of it. I go from being a smooth, boring line on a graph to a giant, blinking red spike of missing data.
That is exactly it. Disappearing is no longer the absence of data. It is the active management of data. And attempting to sever the connection entirely is the loudest signal you can possibly send to the mesh.
Okay, zoom out for a moment. I want to pull our perspective all the way back, way up into the atmosphere, looking down at the whole picture now that we understand the code and the hardware drawing it.
We are looking at the completed map.
Right. We understand the physical layers and the mobile towers. We understand how the APIs and fusion centers bake the disjointed data into a single mesh. We've seen the mathematical shrinking of the unobservable space down to under 10%. And we've realized that dipping into those tiny remaining gaps only makes you glow brighter on the algorithmic radar.
It's a comprehensive system.
I want you to visualize this final map. Imagine the map of the United States. But strip away the mountains. Strip away the rivers, the state lines, the green of the national forests, and the brown of the deserts.
Remove the physical terrain entirely from your mind.
What are you left with? You are left with a map made entirely of signals, a topography of observation. Dense, blindingly bright clusters of white light over the cities, webbing outward along the highways.
Following the paths of motion.
The pulsing, rapid rhythm of commercial API data flowing like digital rivers, the constant, ambient, invisible glow of cellular and Wi-Fi penetration blanketing almost the entire landmass.
And if you execute the mental exercise mandated by the infrastructure sources, if you take this glowing map of signals and you selectively remove everything that can observe, record, or infer,
If you wipe away all the layers of the surveillance stack,
what actually remains of the map? Only fragments.
just tiny, unconnected dots.
Tiny pockets of deep wilderness, brief temporary voids where systems are momentarily down for maintenance or have not yet stabilized.
It is a map with no edges, because an edge on a paper map implies a physical boundary where the known world stops and the great unknown begins. But the edges are dissolving,
Slowly fading away.
not because the physical territory of the country is getting smaller or the coastlines are changing shape.
Shift the map outward and you see that the edges are dissolving because continuous observation has finally reached them.
A map without edges does not need borders. It doesn't need to draw a physical line and say, here be dragons, or here's the great unknown. It only needs continuity.
And as the architecture and the data demonstrate, that continuity is nearly complete.
It's almost absolute.
But remember, the system does not require omnipotence. It does not need a lens focused on every square inch of dirt every single second of the day.
It just needs the tube and the ball.
Exactly. It relies on the mesh. It relies on the mathematical inevitability that your sequence of movement will eventually intersect with a node. The total observation we are discussing is not about constant, unbroken visibility. It is about the statistical certainty of eventual capture.
We started this deep dive with a quiet thought. We talked about unrolling a massive, crinkled paper map and finding the blank spaces, the places where you could exist without a record.
The unobserved space.
What we have mapped today is not the physical vanishing of the land. The mountains are still out there. The gravel roads are still covered in dust.
The geography remains.
What has disappeared is unrecorded time and space, the capacity to be physically present without being computationally processed.
As the spatial research so clearly synthesizes, the question is no longer if you are seen. It is how little remains unseen.
Which leaves us with one final thread to pull. Something to think about the next time you turn your phone off, or pay in cash, or take the long way home down a dirt road just to feel a little bit disconnected.
A final cartographic paradox.
If presence is assumed by the system, and if attempting to vanish into the gaps only flags you as an anomaly in the code, does that mean the only true way to hide in a map with no edges is to generate exactly the kind of continuous, predictable, boring data the system expects?
Is compliance the new camouflage?
Exactly. If absence is suspicious, is hypercompliance the new invisibility?
A reality to consider.
Until next time, keep your eyes on the map.